it's so it's the question is, why did Jesus die for us? I know that's and how does it work? And I know that that's an important thing. And I'm still thinking about the last part of Revelation anyway, so I need to get more into it. Now that the weather's breaking, I'll be able to study a little more. So summer is just intensely heavy in physical work. Try to get caught up so that when this day rises, see everything is put away and et cetera, which hasn't happened yet, but I got all kinds of things sitting out in the rain today, but I have gotten a lot done, and we got through the watering. The plant, the place looks really good, so I'm happy with that. And I want us to really pray. I know we need to take some time and really pray about with the the attendance here has dropped some, and it was picking up, and then it goes up and down, but now it's down a little bit, and that affects the school, and it affects the budget, of course, and it makes it difficult. Now we got lots of things going. Our youth ministry is up and solid and has grown. The evening service, the evening time at the house is picking up new people. But those have a tendency not to impact the core, if that makes sense. It takes a while to get people where they're effective in the core, the core, and the core is what feeds into the finances and everything. So I just want you to pray about it. And I'm not going to preach on that because everybody here's core and you're all busy and you're all function that way. So we need to strengthen our core and pray for those people. We've got a couple of families on the edge that sometimes show up for stuff. And I've been visiting with them and talking to them and seeing if they are interested in the kind of ministry that we're doing here. So let's be praying for that. That we also have a ministry in North Carolina. If you understand that, some of you, I think most everybody here understands it, but we support that ministry quite a bit, as a matter of fact. And I'm just praying about that because the way the perception of the young people and my perception of it is probably not the same, and so as I'm praying for that, there's three reasons why we started the ministry we did here with the school and church and that combined like this. Now, they're separated for the protection of both. Because a church has a specific ministry it's to do. And I know mega churches is what people look at. You have to understand, and that people in a community like this area, you have to understand that the mean church, not just, that is not attitude, that's a statistical term, okay? The mean church is 75 people. There's 50,000 churches in America, and the mean is 75. So a lot of them are less than 75, and a number of them are over 75. But when you get out to the mega churches, on the bell curve, you're like down here. They are almost insignificant. Okay? So to pattern a ministry after this group down here, is not wise. To build ministry or build in your thinking that we want to work like the megachurches. That's why I wrote my little book. And I'm trying, you can pray for me. My weakest point is technology and managing little things. And and I just need some technological decisions made so that I can reprint it. And that's what's holding me up. Because the person that can do that is in North Carolina. So that's been a real a struggle with us, is that our management is out there. And that makes it difficult. I don't mind having a ministry out there. And that. So, but the reason we have done what we've done here is there's no one here doing what we're doing. In North Carolina, I have no idea. I just took one big town in Texas had 5 Bible colleges. 5. And there's 250,000 people that use that market. The Twin Falls market is 250,000. It's 250,000. Now, it goes quite a ways, but so do the people drive. People drive to church 20 miles a day, on a Sunday. The same as they go to the store. They go to the store 20 miles. So, in any other state, in the South or in the East or even in California, 250,000 people would have Bible colleges. They would have a bunch of stuff that we don't have. And that's why we're here. And there's a reason why we don't go to a town like Longview that has 5 Bible colleges. Because, there's no reason to do that. It's not a wise use of investment of our ministry. Now, and that's the reason we planted the church here, is because I couldn't think of anybody at that, this is 1983. There was nobody doing anything that I would do normally. And so, now it's been 40 years ago, and I look around the community. Are there a bunch of churches doing what we do? Are there? Can you think of 1, 2, 3? See, there's nobody doing what we're doing. And nobody does youth ministry like we do, which is ministry, not youth entertainment, and not dating services. Now, it's so common for churches to do dating services that the people are offended when they come out to my house and they think it's a dating service. They expect it. And they find out very quickly, sometimes not so quick enough, that it's not a dating service. And so there's a lot of things that we do that are different. And so we have a niche here. Both the schools have a niche and the church does. Now, I'm not pushing growth here because we have some technical needs. We have some things that we need to get focused, and we still have to fix. And so we're a congregational church. We bring up our attendance, and then we also bring up our problems. We raise our problems. Now, why don't I just switch it over to a pastor-led church? No, that's worse. There isn't an exception on that, on the congregational, to me. I've studied churches. I've been in various churches. The ones that are the least likely to see revival are the ones with the most centralized power. The more centralized the power is, the more unlikely you're going to see revival. The problems, they're not problems, they're just, they're working things that we have to work through, right? I could solve them, just a couple of us would make all those decisions, that'd be it. But then we wouldn't really see the Lord move. Now, but the problems with growing too fast is you get too many people that don't have vision for what you're doing, and then you have voting. So we've solved some of those problems. One, we've removed the school out from under the church board. And everywhere I've been in the world that has Christian schools, that's the way you do it if you want to be successful with those. And because the school and the church have completely, not completely, but they have very separate things to do. And churches that have lots of institutions don't do evangelism and discipleship well. The mega churches, they're mega churches that have their own hospitals, they have their own schools, they have, their own, even doctors, they have a lot. Every study that's ever been done shows that they don't do evangelism and discipleship. Okay, Hill Street in Chicago is the largest megachurch. I don't know if it's larger than Houston, but I don't see Houston as a church at all. It didn't even come under the definition of church. He doesn't preach the Bible, doesn't preach the gospel, doesn't do discipleship, doesn't do anything. Preaches self-help. And that's all. So Hill Street is still, Willow Creek is still that could even classify itself as a church. And they did a big, expensive study to prove to the world that you can be a mega church and disciple, evangelize and disciple. And so they paid Christian sociologists to come in and analyze everything they did to show that. And they failed. They failed their own test miserably. And so I just want to point that out. The mean church is 75. That's very interesting. How many disciples did he have? Did Jesus have? That's the small group, but that's not the smallest group. What was the smallest group? 3. Peter, James, and John. And then he had the 12 disciples, and then that disciples that he sent out the first time were how many? Come on, guys. How many disciples did he start with? He actually had a larger number, and he went downhill, okay, to the 12. What did he start with? 70. He started with 70, plus the women, okay? Then on the day of Pentecost, how many were there waiting? No, that was who they were preaching to. How many were in the upper room waiting? Pray. 120. 120. Okay? So the women are there. They got counted that time. Is it just an accident? Is it just happenstance that the mean happens to be 75? No, it's not. It's not. It's not an accident. That's basically the number of a church. So we're a little low, okay? So I do want to come up, I want to see us grow enough to where we're not scratching, for grain. So whatever we need to look at some things like that. Next thing I want to work on is I want to help Hannah with the music. I want to get people helping her. And the reason I brought this up last week, but this week it's even more, because both of us are looking at more hospitalization soon. The reason she's in the hospital is because they didn't do the surgery because of COVID, and she needed to have that surgery. So unless she does, she's just going to keep going back to the hospital, and I'm probably looking for more surgery. I know that I've got some problems. So that's on the church, where we're at today. I know we're doing that. Could have had that. But otherwise, we're doing really well. And when we have groups in here where we're open to the community, place is full. It's full. So, because we're impacting the other churches, and it shows because they come in here because they're involved in the special things that we might do. We had 60 people at camp. So that. And the other issue is I want you to really pray for Nathaniel and Rachel because God has not allowed them to stabilize and set roots there. And I believe it's God. And they've been there a long time. He's put in 200 and some applications. And during that time, he got his MBA. There's only, and they shut him out of leadership in that restaurant, and within 2 weeks, he's back in leadership again, just because they need him, and because he's the one so a lot of times he'll be the only one in the restaurant that knows how everything runs. Not even the new managers there know how to do it, so he has to do it. So, and he tries to get out of the restaurant, and it just isn't working. So I want you to really pray about this, because we've either God's got to provide a way, or God's got to provide some new leadership here, because they're doing a lot of leadership, and you guys are paying for it. And we probably put $10,000 into their living expenses just this year alone. So, and you say, well, I never see him, but that is probably at the top of our list of needs, is that our management team is out there. And God is not letting them establish. If it was the Lord's will, they would be established in a ministry, and they'd be running with support and other pastors behind them. And they have you. That's all they have. They have this team. This is their support team in Charlotte, is right here in this room. And that is probably our number one thing. That it's not a negative problem necessarily. It just needs to work it out, or we replace them. Okay, and I don't see that happening. But that's it. Now, so we've been talking about the atonement, and I understand because there's so many issues, and usually I would preach on the atonement at least every year, once a year, and so we're talking about that. Here's the question we have. The answer to the atonement is, got the cross. I don't have a whiteboard or anything, so I'll just use this. So I'll be orthodox. You can look at that. Okay. Now if you can see the cross is in a circle, okay? Actually a globe, because everything that you talk about the cross is three-dimensional, not flat, okay? Because everything relates to everything else. What are the problems? Why does there need to be an atonement? That really bothers a lot of people. The last sermon I heard in the Disciples of Christ Church was that the pastor had denounced the atonement. That was horrible. Echo was there. Remember that. And that's the day I decided to start this church. Because I wasn't going to stay in Jerome. I'd gotten that, from that young people get who grow up here, and I've got to go out and experience the world, right? And so but after being around the world and whatnot, I came back here and I saw a need. It was the need that really attracted me. that I can be on the mission field and not go anywhere. I could be a missionary. And now we're working in 3 or 4 languages in just this little group. So I decided that day to stay and start the church. The other thing, something else that happened to me, because I'm a graduate of NNU, I'm a member of their alumni, and I go to their every fourth year quarterly meeting. They have one every year, but they move them around because the Nazarenes were big enough to do that. They've got Bibles. They got like 4 Bible schools. NNU, one in California, one in Kansas City, and then one in the mid and one back east. Now, and so they move those meetings. So every 4 years, it's here in Idaho. But the last time I went, it was on the Atonement, and Dr. Maddox, who's from Jerome, and some other PhDs were there doing the keynote address and everything. And he was good. Ben Worthington was there from Asbury, talking about the biblical view of the atonement. Randy talked about the history of it and the background of the Wesleyan view of the atonement. And because I didn't know anybody anymore in the Nazarene Church, I sat with the PhDs because they were all my friends. Okay, Dr. Lodahl, Ben Worthington, I met for the first time, and of course Randy and I grew up here in Twin, and we're the same age. So Randy Maddox, we're all the same name, dude. You know, I mean, it's not hard to be friends with Randy that does theology, right? So I sat there, but I remember the woman, PhD, was the head of the department, and she addressed in a smaller group, because the large group was 2,000, and she was talking to pastors only, and there was about 75 or 80 people in the room, I think, and she explained why her reason that God had sent his son to die for the sins of the world. And her explanation was that it basically is an apology from God to us for making everything so screwed up, especially social justice. That's where she's coming from, right? Now, you might think, why do I think the way I think about this part of the country when there is a Bible college just an hour or 2 away, hour and a half away? That's the reason. That's the reason. I would never pay $32,000 a year to send someone there. It's a good school as far as school goes, but it's not a great representation of Christianity there. And I knew that in 77 from there, that this is where they were going. I heard 3 lectures on social justice while I was there, that 2-day conference, and from faculty members at NNU. One was 2 of them were philosophy, and then this head of the religion department. Now, but I saw it in 77. Now, it's why I went to Trinity rather than to Kansas City. Kansas City's the Nazarene Seminary, and I chose to go to Trinity and join the Evangelical Free Church, which I'd never heard of at that time, but I chose to go there anyway because of their faculty. And went there. Now, here, but it points to the atonement is the death of Jesus Christ, the incarnation and death of Jesus Christ is the core, it is the center of the Christian faith. And it's all tied, the whole life of Jesus, the incarnation, the life, he had to be God. Do you understand this? The problem is that sinful man, we have broken fellowship with God. We're no longer in a position, we're no longer in the Garden of Eden. God separated his presence from men, the men and women that he created to love and to fellowship with. He separated from because as it says in Genesis 6, their thoughts and their heart is sin continually. Okay? And Toby, could you go on the table in the office and bring me Dalrymple's book? I was going to quote from it. It's a little white book sitting on the table. Anyway, so the issue in atonement, first of all, is to reconcile us back with the Father. It's to restore us in the Garden of Eden, kind of a restoration, bring us back into fellowship. You know that there's two things that we see in the Garden of Eden that happens. As soon as they sin, they know they're naked, and done about that. And they hide from God. Okay? Why would they hide from God? Their shame. And shame, guilt, and they realize their attitude about the Father's changed. Okay? Because they have shame and guilt, they don't want to be around him. They don't want to be in his presence. Now, the presence of God in the present of being present with sinners is part of what the atonement is to do, is to bring the Father and the sinner back. So you have 4 problems, basic problems. Now there's a lot more problems, but they will probably, you can see how they will fit into it. The first thing we notice is this relationship here between the Father, we'll put the Father at the top, and between the sinner, which is at the bottom. The problems are vertical between the Father and people, between us and our Father. That relationship is broken, and it's broken as you can see it in Genesis with Adam and Eve. Their attitude about the Father's changed. Their attitude about themselves has changed. And so that relationship with God is broken. Now, when you look at the passages in Scripture, to reconcile the Father with the Son, with the sinner, with his Father, is you have to the question you have to come up with is, where's the problem greater? Is it with the Father, or is it with the Son? Now, theologically, in the history of the Western Church, the problem is with the Father. Okay? Now, I grant you there's a problem there. Because if they knew the Father, they wouldn't have hid from him. They would have run to him. Does that make sense? If you're going to, the first thing, when you look at that, I'm not reading these verses, because if I read the verses, we'll be here all year, okay? The prodigal son has a bad attitude about his father. You can see it right up front. How come this is my money? I have my wealth. Why don't you give it to me? What kind of a father are you? You make me work. I do this, all this stuff. You don't love me. You love my brother, but you don't love me, right? So he has an attitude, and you can see it. And so he says, "Give me what belongs to me, and I can go and live to please myself." Okay. Now. There has to be some kind of restoration in the young man's mind for him to even want to do that, to be reconciled. And you all know that people oftentimes who grow up in the church are like, they become prodigals because they have a wrong perception of the Father. Now, God is not only Father, he's also the governor of the universe. And so you have a little bit of a conflict in God himself. And you can see that because a lot of the stories about reconciliation between in Scripture have God represented as a father or as a grower or as a king, you know. And in Daniel you have that problem with the father being gracious and being forgiving causes a problem with his leadership, with his governing. Okay? You see that with the king. You know, he sentenced Daniel to the lion's den, and the comment is, you know, I know you're innocent. I would release you, but I made this law, and the laws of the Medes and the Persians cannot change. So he's got to carry out some kind of punishment because Daniel did break the law. Now, the question, you can look at it a lot of ways, you know. There was only in that situation where he had an unjust law, an unrighteous law, the only person that could take Daniel's place was him, the king. But we all know what would happen. Because his law was unrighteous, he's not going to be innocent. So if the king takes Daniel's place, Daniel will have to take his place because he won't come back. So and the king's afraid of that. And you know, we look at it from our perspective, and we know that probably the fear is justified. Now, but there is a problem. If you're going to forgive, you've got to have some way to uphold your law, your government. So that from the Father's point of view, he has to have a reason to forgive, to be gracious. That will fit in with him being the governor of the universe. But he also has to have the heart of a father to want to forgive. Okay? Now, I get this all the time. Well, why can't God just forgive? I mean, why doesn't he just forgive everybody? He's going to do that anyway. We know that people aren't going to obey him anyway. Now, here's a problem with the Western thinking, is that, and it's not so much in the East, because Eastern people are more open to things being complicated, okay? And us in the West, we like everything cookie cutter, everything down to a menu, and this is exactly how it's going to happen. They're all going to be the same, and they're all going to work the same. And if you do the right thing, you'll get the blessing from it. I mean, we just think that way. We think absolute, and that there's no difficult way to get around it. So that's what you have. You have theology basically defining that. But you have to understand that making very simple things. Jesus paid the Father, took care of that. He died. He took my penalty. And so now I don't owe the Father nothing. He took my penalty, so I can't have any penalty on my part. Okay? In my part. And so all I have to do is pray the prayer to accept it. And that's it. It's all done. So I got this little menu, right? And the Eastern people think differently. They think, they realize, first of all, they're open to a world that has many different powers moving in it, okay? And we have a hard time believing, even though I know we say people, and even Pentecostals will pray a lot of times and cancel the demons or that. And because and that goes beyond the Pentecostals. But in the West, you know, we don't really see demonic activity as real as it really is. Because a person who sees a sneeze as a demon has no clue. You understand what I'm saying? That's why when they prophesy over everything, and every feeling I have is a prophecy, I don't have any clue what prophecy is either. When you see something as everything, then you're not really understanding it at all. That's what I'm saying. And in the East, they're more open to complex situations. So we have to have a simple gospel. And I'm not so sure that it's that. I'm very sure that it's not that simple. Okay? The Father has a problem. And the more you think about it, the more you think about justice, and we do the same thing with justice. It's nothing. When people talk about justice, they have no idea what they're talking about. So, we are psychological beings. And I was listening to Jordan Peterson the other day, and that same talk, he's talking to these college students, and he says, well, can't we just do it without religion? Why do we need the complex, the Jesus thing, and dying for sin and everything? And why would we have to worship Jesus? Why can't we just why can't it just be simple, right? And Peter says, you don't even know self. Complex. We are really complex beings, and you have to take psychology classes just to get to know you. And so I want to point out to you, we are very complex. God made us in His image, and He's not simple. He's not simple. But people want Him to be simple. That's why they have 4 omnis. They've got God down in 4 ways. You know, He's this, He's this, He's this, He's this. That's it. And then you start talking about God related and everything, and people freak out. That's not simple. It's not simple. You know, and so thinking about the atonement, we have a very simple God. Jesus pays. Father's problem. As my justice now, and pretty much live the way we want to, with everything finished, accomplished. But like I'm saying to you, there is a real problem. God has a real problem. One, He has to uphold His law. If the laws of the Medes, the Persians cannot be changed, okay, how much more is it true about His law? Well, so we make, simple to haven't, so that means we can't. And so we're going to have to change that too. We've got to be freed from the law, and as we pay the Father back, we don't keep the law. Because, again, we have that credit card now. We have the Christ righteousness, so all the law keeping has been solved. You see how all these things work into an understanding, lack of understanding the gospel. There's a problem with forgiving His law and keeping us from developing that attitude. He's got to solve that problem. He has to. One thing He does not have to do. He does not have to become forgiving. Jonah shows us that. Okay? Just read Jonah. I knew you were so forgiving and so gracious and so compassionate. You'd even forgive the Ninevites. I mean, that's in Jonah's own words. That's how compassionate and forgiving God is, that He would forgive Ninevites. If you go into Ninevites, you see why there's some justification in Jonah's thinking. They're Kurds today, and you ask anybody over there, Turkey, from this side, from that side, from this side, if they get along with the Kurds. And the only people that get along with the Kurds right now is Israel, which is an interesting thing about that. One thing that does not have to happen is God's going to forgive, but he's also going to uphold his law, his justice. He's going to cancel our debt, and at the same time, we'll owe him everything. So the typical way we see the atonement today is wrong on all corners. Because he's going to uphold his character. He's going to justify himself. He's going to raise the honor of the law. And it's not going to make him merciful because he's already merciful. And you can see that in Bible. For God so loved the world, God the Father so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. Now, the atonement there in that passage is coming from the Father, not Jesus. Can you take away that ring a little bit, Bob? Got that? It's ringing. Can you hear the ring? Okay. It's my ears are not bad. So we go to the next problem, and that is that vertical line, and that's us. Every election cycle, the executive branch has the power to what do you call it? Cancel all of forgive, be gracious, pardon, give pardon. That's it. To pardon sinners. Now, in history, there have been some really nasty ones, like Clinton. Remember Clinton? How tens of thousands of pardons. And we had a crime wave like you would not believe. When I was watching, these people are up on a mountain, and by a lake, a mountain lake, and they see some rocks, where some rocks fall down the lake, and they're waiting for the ripple. Unwisely. The lake rose about 10 feet inside the lake. You watch that. Now, wisdom requires that we prepare for waves. Okay? If you're going to pardon criminals, there's going to be a wave. And wisdom would say or require that you prepare for it. You think about it. And if a president or governor has to do that, don't you think God would have to do that? If he's going to hand out pardons, like Paul says, you think Clinton can hand out pardons. The only difference between Clinton and God is there's a lot of difference between Clinton and God. Okay? What God is loving and wise. He's wise. He made a wave of crime. He cannot create a wave of crime. Why is there waves of crime around mega churches? Yeah. Just think about that. Where the super churches are, they're surrounded by crime waves. Now, it's not always true, but it generally is true. I mean, we're so used to thinking it's a crime wave that we don't realize what's there. Some of the greatest Christian schools in the history of America, Moody Bible Institute, Wheaton College, Trinity, and then you go into the older schools like Western Evangelical, the Western, the big Methodist areas there, training their Methodist clergy. Again, Okay, so why is there crime wave around these cities? Yeah. So God can't have a crime wave. But how is he going to, Paul says in Romans 5, he's going to increase mercy in abundance. Like instead of a few rocks, falling down in the lake, he's going to release a whole bunch of stones. If he's going to have a super pardoning day, actually it's called the Day of Atonement, he's got to solve that problem. At the bottom of the vertical, what has happened? You have to transform the sinner. If you're going to pardon them, you also have to transform them. Thinking like we think in Western Christianity today is that, like I was asked by a gang leader in a prison, do I have to obey God? Because that's what I'm always told. When these guys come into this prison, they tell me everything's grace, grace, grace. All I have to do is accept it, and then I don't even have to obey God. I don't have to pay for my crimes. I don't have to pay for my sins. But I don't even have to continue to obey. I don't even have to be concerned about it. I was in Chicago when I heard Moody Station in Chicago say this, MR Hahn, if you pray that prayer, you can commit murder and still go to heaven. I heard that on the Christian radio. Now, I got just 5 minutes. I'm going to do this. There's a cross piece here. Now, the second thing, the third thing that we see is the horizontal. The atonement has to solve the horizontal. On the fifth side, on one side, we have the world. The reason you have a crime wave is because that pardoning not only frees all these hardened criminals from, the University of Crime, but it tells every little guy out there that you get away with this stuff. Look at what's happening, in those cities run by this kind of attitude. They just walk in. They don't even care anymore. They just walk in, just grab stuff. And I'm seeing people react to it. Not security people, but the people in the store that are paying are after these guys, are going and grabbing them and calling the police themselves. Because if the people in the store do anything, they'll get fired. So the people standing there grab these people and hold them and call the police themselves. Why is it that you see the same moral standard in the churches, in the Christian high schools, and in the Christian colleges? You see the exact same moral standard that you see outside. In fact, sometimes it's worse. Only worse because of the amount of knowledge that are like. One time at a particular Christian school here, all 5 of the girls who graduated were pregnant. I'm not going to say which one it was. Which school it was. I say, well, how is that? I told you Josh McDowell went on doing the Why Wait campaign in Christian schools. And after 10 years or 15 years, they studied it and realized they were not making any impact at all. And he stopped. Because he said they don't know the difference between right and wrong. They don't know, when they make a promise, they don't even know what a promise was. They don't know what a covenant is. because we are so used to preaching that super, super simple. It's I call it the only program, you know, faith only, grace only, you know, but it comes from their view of atonement. So what happens when you teach that is you teach a wrong concept of atonement, is the world does not even try to obey God. There's no moral standard at all. Anything you do as far as in criminal justice, you has to be to impact the world, people, the young coming up. You have to. It has to be such that it decreases crime, not increases it. It decreases it. Now, you have, and so you have the world problem in the atonement, but then the last thing I want to talk about is the principalities. And there are principalities, there are powers called executive powers that are there to execute the law. That's their job. Has nothing to do with their character in a certain sense in the world. But it has to do, they have a law, they have to carry it out, they have to execute that. Now, right now there's an attempt to impeach Biden, and it's over his executive power to keep America safe. And he's not only not doing that, he's rewarding people, he's actually giving them incentive to break the law. When you incentivize crime, you are failing as an executive in government, and a government executive. If you incentivize crime, you're failing. And now, we've known this for a long time, okay? It's funny that Clinton is the way he was. Clinton tried to restore health and welfare so that it was not incentivizing crime, incentivizing laziness and not taking care of your family. And he tried to do that with health and welfare, but he didn't try to do that with the justice system. Now, and there were some things about Clinton that he wasn't the worst. That's why he's never called the worst president of all, you know, because he tried to play both sides. And there's other presidents that did not try to play both sides. They just were bad, like Carter and Obama, and now Biden. Put both of them down one, and he's going to take over head the first place. Since he's not running the government down there, we have to find out who gets the title. Huh? So you have executives. What are God's executives? You know, what you see is when the head of the executives, which is the governor, the king, the dictator, whatever, when they don't uphold the people that are under them, execute the law, the penalty or the law. When they don't support them and they undermine them, then they become the criminals. Okay? The executive branch becomes the criminals. And you see this, if you've been in Mexico, you see it down there. People are having to take over the execution of the law in the villages. But they have a no-gun control they've had for a long time. So they're having to go to grandpa to get anything. You know, shotguns and things like that. Because Mexico's had a no-gun policy for a long time. And the only people that have guns are the criminals that were supplied guns by the Obama administration. I'm not, you know, people say, Randy, you talk politics all the time. It's because politics and theology intermingle. I'm not wanting you to understand anything really about Mexico government. But I am wanting you to understand the way God is. And they're not that far apart in terms of that. But when you in Mexico, when they took power away from the people, and they took the power away from the executive branch, the law enforcement people, took their weapons, gave them a single-shot 22, and they said, go out and get some drug cartel members, and found out they were supplied thousands and thousands of military-grade weapons by the United States government. His idea was that they have serial numbers and we can track them and tell where they go. How they do that. But anyway, that what those military people are going to do is they're just going to become part of the system. They just melt into the background, Because who's going to stand up against them? I said, well, if I'm working for them, I'll get one of those weapons. And I can trade in my 22 or my 410 and pick up something decent. And that, or they'll do what they do a lot of times is when they catch a criminal, they call them disappearing people. And you have that in Mexico, you have that in Asian countries, they just call the people disappear. When they think you've broken the law, you disappear. So they take it into their own hands. But whatever they do, they're not upholding justice, because disappearing people doesn't help at this level down here. It doesn't transform anybody. And it doesn't decrease crime in your community. And believe me, the executive branch does impact all levels. Okay, so here's the thing. Atonement has to solve the God knowledge problem and uphold the justice of God, the kingdom of God. It has to transform the sinner so that when he's part of it, he comes out a model student, model citizen. And this, in Argentina, the number one seminary is the third floor of the biggest prison in Argentina. And I met those guys personally in Wyoming. And it is so powerful. I don't know what they do. A lot of it's the same stuff you're getting from me because they're trained in YWAM. YWAM had a big impact on them. They would come out of there and they would go start churches. Now, what if they get a life sentence? Well, you just change prisons when you graduate. So, there are plenty of prisons, by the way. So the graduates that don't ever get out, because becoming a Christian and becoming a pastor inside a prison doesn't change the fact that they still get a life sentence. So that mean they can't be pastored? No, they go to another jail. They send them to specific jails that need them. Now, so I don't care whether you get out or you don't get out, it still has to transform the sinner. And it does. We'll talk about that. It has to incentivize the world not to have crime waves. Okay? And it has to uphold the executive branch of law, which is complex in the spiritual world, because it includes all powers, according to Romans 13, right? God has ordained all authority, but it also includes the things that you don't see here, because those principalities have the power of life and death as well. And you're going to see that the atonement also has to uphold the execution of the law, whether it's by men or by principalities. It has to uphold that. And I'll explain to you how the atonement does that. So I'm going to take at least 4 weeks, 1 week, to deal with each one of those 4 things. Okay? Father, just thank you. And thank you for today. Thank you for the rain, Father. And I put this ministry before you. and it is yours. And you've kept me going this long, and I know you'll keep me going as long as you need.